I'm so happy to be here. I've never attended this conference before, but it's a whole new community. People talking about really very contemporary issues, and of course, at the heart of a lot of what we're talking about is agency and questioning and thinking skills. And so, I've already mentioned to a few people today that this webinar is on tonight. So hopefully there's a few others attending.
Great. All right. So, Pam, are we starting the webinar? Yeah, so I think we are live on YouTube, it says. Yeah, Pam, can you confirm it? Then we can start. Okay, I think we are already live. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Shitanshu Mishra, and right now I'm representing Asia Pacific Society for Computers in Education's webinar series. So this is known as APSCE Webinar series. And I happen to be chairing this interesting special interest group on educational use of problems and questions. And in today's webinar, we are going to learn more about how questions can be used in education. So the title of today's webinar is Introduction to Rigorous Process of Asking Questions, which is an essential and long overlooked learning technology. So our speakers today are Dr. Dan Rothstein and Ms. Tomoko Ochi. Dr. Rothstein is co-founder of the Right Question Institute, co-author with Lou Santana of Make Just One Change, Teach Students to Ask Their Questions. So this book was published by Harvard Education Press. Dr. Rothstein has led workshops, seminar, and interactive keynote presentations around the world. He also serves as an adjunct lecturer at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. He teaches a course on building nimble and democratic minds. Ms. Uchi is a manager of question formulation theory program at Right Question Institute. She leads RQI's program on developing the question formulation theory for learning and for democratic actions. She has led sessions on the use of QFT for a wide range of higher education audiences in both United States and in Japan. So we'll transfer the baton to Dr. Dan and Tomoko. Over to you. And looking forward to very exciting session on question posing. Interestingly, I happen to have my PhD in question posing, how students can use question posing for better learning. So hoping to add on to that knowledge further and hoping to get some more discussion and deliberation points for my future thought processes. Over to you, Tomoko.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen.
Yes.
Thank you, Mishra, for introduction. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for attending this webinar today. I am Tomoko, and I'm currently in Tokyo visiting my family, and great to be here today. And we'll kick off the session. So this webinar is actually an online workshop. So sometimes we ask you to do some work on your own and share it in the chat box. So when you see these icons, that means either you are a task or share your work via chat box. So to do that, please select in the chat box, please select all panelists and attendees and share your name and where you are attending from in the chat box for practice. Thank you. And while you are sharing them, your name and where you are attending from, let me have Dan kick off the session.
Great, thank you, Tomoko, and thank you, Shitansu, for the introduction, and we're very excited to be here. So today, what we're going to look at is first a little overview on the importance of asking questions for learning and research. Then Tomoko is going to lead you through an actual experience in using the question formulation technique, which was developed through years of our work and experimentation and research. We're going to then unpack the question formulation technique, the QFT, examine the different elements of it. We're going to share with you a theory of question formulation that has emerged from our work. And then we'll have a chance to close up and hear your questions and discussion. So we are going to look now at the importance of asking questions for learning and research. So Richard Feynman, a Nobel laureate in physics, well-known intellectual, once talked about how there is no learning without having to pose a question, talking about the fundamental importance. Stuart Firestein, who we've come to know well, is former chair of the biology department at Columbia University in New York City. He wrote a brilliant little book called Ignorance, How It Drives Science. And he talked about how his graduate students would come into a course and see a 1,400-page textbook, and they would think, that's all that there is, that's all that we need to know. And he said, no, that's simply all that we know. What we don't know is much greater. So therefore, we must teach students how to think in questions, how to manage ignorance. And he was joined by college presidents who were interviewed by the New York Times about what college students should learn in 4 years of college. And Leon Botstein, the president of Bard College, said the primary skills should be analytic skills of interpretation and inquiry. In other words, know how to frame a question. He said, as did this next president of a college that you'll hear from, is that there's just too much knowledge. Students can't learn everything. So it's really important that they learn how to ask their own questions or how to ask the right questions, which is what Nancy Cantor talked about from University of Illinois. Yet, only 27% of graduates believe that college taught them how to ask their own questions. So there's a gap there between a recognition by the leaders of universities, by Nobel laureates, about the importance of questions for learning and for research, and yet it does not seem to be a skill that is actively taught. So where did we come up with this idea of developing a method for teaching this skill? Well, it turns out that it didn't come out of research, it didn't come out of academia. It came from work that my colleague Luz Santana and I and others were doing in one city in Massachusetts on trying to encourage students to stay in school to prevent them from dropping out of school. It was a low-income community in Massachusetts. And as part of it is we were engaging the parents of the students, and the parents told us they didn't go to the children's schools, they didn't want to participate because we don't even know what to ask. So they named a fundamental obstacle to participation, to advocacy, to becoming a partner with the school. So we basically learned from them and set off to try to look at, well, how do you teach this skill? And it turns out that it's a very sophisticated thinking skill. And it took us a lot of trial and error to figure out how to do it. In the end, we created the question formulation technique and to offer training and resources and support. And it was used in multiple fields. The National Science Foundation in the United States supports use of the question formulation technique and research on it. The Library of Congress, the National Institute of Health sponsored research about the use of our methods in healthcare. There's been work done in terms of voter engagement. And in 2011, Harvard Education Press published our book. You see the version in English on the left and the version in Japanese on the right, which really brought the question formulation technique to more than 1 million classrooms around the world in more than 150 countries around the world. So we're going to go into the question formulation technique. I'll give you a quick overview, and then Tomoko will lead you through the process. So when using the question formulation technique, individuals work on producing their own questions, working to improve their own questions, and strategizing on how to use your questions. So that's what you will be doing in a minute with Tomoko. And at the end, you'll be reflecting on what you have learned by formulating and working on your own questions. Okay. So before we begin that, I just want to give you a quick peek at a way one teacher, this has been used, remember, from kindergarten, from preschool, all the way through doctoral research and beyond, and laboratory research. So it's been used at all levels of education. But I just want to show you one example from a 4th grade classroom, where the teacher is about to introduce students to a unit on variables. And she uses her focus, the question focus what they would be asking about, just this simple equation here. 24 equals smiley face plus smiley face plus smiley face. So think about it. You're going to see now the questions that these 4th graders asked before they were going to study variables. Here are some examples. Why is the 24 first? What do the smiley faces mean? Why are there 3 smiley faces? How am I supposed to figure this out? Is the answer 12? Can I put any number for a smiley face? Do 3 faces mean something? Do the numbers have to be the same because the smiley faces are the same? What numbers will work here? Does it mean 24 is a really happy number? So as you can see, students are able to go to many different places with it, can replace each smiley with an 8. Does it always have to be smiley faces? Do we always have to use 3 things? So it just gives you a sense of the creativity of teachers in designing ways for students to formulate questions about something that they have not yet studied. Okay, thank you, Tomoko. And now Tomoko is going to lead you through your own experience in which you will be working with a question focus that she will present to you.
Thank you, Dan. As Dan said, I'm going to facilitate the question formulation technique for the next 20 minutes. As Dan explained, you will produce questions, work with them. And for each step, I will give you specific instruction on slides, so please pay attention to the slide. And we are going to ask you to share your work via chat box, so please select everyone or all attendees in the chat box. Like the setting has been changed, so now you can select everyone. Okay, so and due to time constraint today, you experience the QFT mostly on your own, but please remember this is a practice session and we think it's really important to experience the whole process and you can use it for the future. So let's get started. So please get out a piece of paper or pen, pencil, or like you can use a Google Doc or a Word doc on your devices. So the first step of the QFT is producing questions. You'll be producing questions about a prompt I will share shortly. Before doing that, let me introduce the rules that you are going to be following as you produce questions. You are going to Ask as many questions as you can. Do not stop to answer, judge, or discuss. Write down every question exactly as it comes to mind and change any statement into question. So please share your thoughts about these 4 rules in the chat box. What might be difficult about following these rules?
Please share some thoughts on what you think might be difficult about following these rules. Take a look and see if there's one of the rules that you feel might be difficult to follow. Please share that. So you're going to be using these rules to go into the next steps that Tomoko is going to lead you through. So it's really important to just take a moment to look at these and think about what might be difficult about following these rules. John talked about they might seem strange at first as an activity. We tend to go directly to answering the questions that we formulated. We start answering questions or discuss in the middle of the exercise. Thank you. These are exactly the kinds of things that people very often feel about this process, that they actually have to change the conventional way of working with questions, which is ask a question, stop to discuss it, answer it, think about it. But here, these are rules for producing questions, so you're going to need to follow them in the next step. So I think, Tomoko, we could go to the next step.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So please remember to follow the rules in producing your question. And also there is actually another thing to ask. So please number the question as you produce question. So write down the key focus, which is I'm going to share right now on the top of the paper. And please remember to number the question and follow the rules as you produce questions. So you are going to ask question about this, learning and technology. For the next 3 minutes, please ask as many questions as you can.
So before you start sharing in the chat, we want you to keep your own list of questions, because we're going to take you through a couple more steps before we'll share your questions in the chat.
You have 1 more minute. Please keep asking questions. following the rules? Okay, now please finish writing down the last question. We are moving on to the next step. So next step is categorize your question, improve your question, and categorize your question. Here are definitions. Close-ended question can be answered with a yes or no, or with a one word. Open-ended question require more explanation. So in the next 1 minute, please identify your question as close-ended question or open-ended question by marking them with a C or an O. And if there are any question you do not agree on, you can also write down C/O. So please categorize your question for 1 minute. You don't need to finish all of the question you produce. Okay, finish up the last one. And if you have not finished all the categorization, it's okay. So before doing the further work with questions, open-ended and close-ended question both have advantage and disadvantage. Let's discuss them. And I love to hear from you. What are some advantages of close-ended question? Please share your thoughts in the chat box. What are the advantages of close-ended question?
Closed questions help us work with facts. There's scope and focus, quick for clarifying thoughts. Closed-ended questions provide quick clarifications. Thank you. This is very helpful. Okay, Tomoko.
Yeah, how about disadvantages of close-ended question? Please share them in the chat box again.
What are some disadvantages of closed-ended questions? They're not always conducive to discussion or dialogue. They're less exploratory, however necessary, as they resolve bottlenecks. Thank you. Sometimes learner can answer a question without guessing. Thank you. Discourage exploration.
Thank you. Let's move on to open-ended question. What are the advantages of open-ended question?
Open-ended questions make us think. Inviting learners to dig and think deeper, they lead to exploring new information and knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How about the disadvantages of open-ended question? What are the disadvantages of open-ended question?
Open-ended questions sometimes lead to a resolution. There might be too cognitive overloading for those inexperienced or not tuned to deep thinking. They make us work hard.
Okay, thank you very much. So now
Thank you.
let's do a little more work with the closed-ended and open-ended question. As you see, you name, like there are both advantages and disadvantages of each types of question. So please take one closed-ended question and change it into an open-ended question. And take one open-ended question and change it into a closed-ended question. And please add them as new question at the bottom of your list of questions. So if you've asked 13 questions so far, these would be questions 14 and 15. And if you haven't asked each type of question, now it's your opportunity to ask one. So you will have 1 minute to come up with at least 2 new questions. So please add your question, change your question from one type to another and add them at the bottom of the list. Okay, finish up the last thoughts and thank you for your work so far. We are moving on to the next step. That's prioritize question. Now I invite you to select 3 questions you consider most important. Please keep in mind that question focus, learning and technology. And after prioritizing, think about why did you choose these 3 questions? Where are your priority questions in the sequence of your entire list of questions? So next 2 minutes, please select your 3 priority questions that you consider most important from your list. If you have any new question during this step or wanna tweak questions, that's fine. You can add the question at the bottom of the list. Okay, thank you very much. Now in the chat box, please select this. One of your priority question, placement of priority question in your original sequence. For example, you ask 12 questions in total and your priority question are 3, 5, 8, and please share 3, 5, 8 out of 12. And if possible, please also share rationale for selecting your priority question. So in the chat box, please share 1, 2, and possibly 3.
And tech support asking better questions. That was number 1. If you could share which were your 3 priority questions out of your total number, that'd be great. What are some good tech tools that help learning? What is learning? What is technology? Is learning equal to technology? So you had question that was 1, 2, and 6 out of 6. And the rationale is the definition needed for the question focus. Our questions learning different, those written to those to other contexts. Number 2 out of 9. What is learning? Number 1 out of 12. Does the technology hinder learning for the average user? Number 7 out of 7. Do we have a shared understanding of what technology is? Technology for what kind of learning? Why technology for learning? And number 5, any prerequisite skills or mindset needed for better use of technology from the teacher and students. Are questions with respect to technology learning different than those to other contexts?
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing. So,
Yeah, and one last one there, Tomoko, is John asked, which was number 3 out of 5, how can technology support learning?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. And Shatanshu asked, what are number 3 out of 9 questions? What are the technologies that promote asking of questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are moving on to the last step of the QFD. I'm inviting you all to reflect quickly on what you experienced. First, please share your thoughts on this. How does formulating questions about learning and technology affect your thinking about learning and technology?
John had another question. So if you could share in the chat your thoughts in response to this first reflection question. On how does formulating questions about learning and technology affect your thinking your thinking about learning and technology. Expands the scope of my thinking. It compels us to think more about the links between learning and technology. So this was not a discussion about learning and technology. This was you're formulating questions about learning and technology. Review the thoughts and assess which are most important. Identify your own current understanding of learning and technology. Do I understand this term before discussing it?
Yeah, thank you very much. Keep sharing.
Divergent thinking, which is prompted from your direction. Ask as many questions as you can. So that, thank you for mentioning that. Thank you.
So let's move on to the next reflection question. What was different about this experience as a learning process? Please share what do you feel what's different about this experience as a learning process.
Thinking in questions provides space in the classroom. It was engaging and fun. It gives license to think. It is a deliberate cognitive tool strategy to make ourselves ready to learn, explore beyond our current knowledge, state of knowledge. More engaging by thinking about questions and simply taking information in.
Thank you very much. This is great. You all finished the QFT now, and you went through a lot of thinking process as you wrote in the chat box. Thank you very much for all of your work and sharing. So let's have Dan unpack what you went through really quickly.
So thank you, Tomoko, for leading us through the process. And I think that people's reflections gave a sense of the kind of intellectual work and labor that was done. And also very interesting to hear how people felt as a result of using this kind of process. So here's the question formulation technique on one slide, which is what you've done. You produced your own questions, you improved your questions by working on your open and close-ended questions. You then thought about your priority questions. We did not do an action plan in this session. You shared your priority questions and where they were in the list of your total list of questions, and you reflected. So part of what we have learned about the power of the question formulation technique is that it allows people to use 3 different thinking abilities in one process. Each one of these thinking abilities can sometimes be difficult for people to do, but it's structured in a way so that there are actually 3 thinking abilities that are being used. So the first one is, as one of you mentioned, is divergent thinking. And you connected it directly to the rules for producing questions, which are designed to promote divergent thinking. I have to tell you, those 4 rules, it took us 8 years to create those 4 rules. You do the math. We did a half a rule a year. Well, what we actually did was we had to look at what's the minimum number of rules that we could offer that would allow people to do divergent thinking, which is very often a very difficult thing to do. So that's the key first step of the question formulation technique. Then you moved on to convergent thinking. You began to look at open and close-ended questions. You began to, and then you prioritized your questions. So you were narrowing down, you were looking at the kind of information you are now interested in getting based on the questions that you asked. And then you did metacognitive thinking. Tomoko asked you to think about what might be difficult about following the rules for producing questions, and you took note of what's different about using those rules from the usual way that you might discuss or judge or answer questions. And then she asked you to think about what you learned. What was different about this learning experience, and what you learned about the actual topic of learning and technology. So those were the 3 different thinking abilities that you used. So if you look at question formulation, we use the term formulation very deliberately because we connect it to generating questions divergently and then working to improve them through convergent and metacognitive thinking. This is very different from simply, let's ask a lot of questions. This is very different. This is about using a rigorous process, which in layman's terms could be described as working on one's own questions by generating questions broadly, thinking strategically about your questions, and then reflecting upon your work with your own questions.
Thank you very much, Dan, for unpacking the question formulation technique and sharing definition of question formulation. Now, let me really quickly introduce a theory of question formulation. From 30 years of our RQI's work, we consistently heard and observed the impact of formulating one's own question on learning, and we wanted to show the power of being able to formulate one's own question and develop a theory of question formulation. We developed a theory based on these sources. Directly observable changes and self-reported changes from students and from educators. And we also have some studies, research studies and program evaluation on question formulation technique. And we also dig into literature about questions and questioning, and also look at extensive research on learning. And these things contributed to formation of a theory of question formulation. So question formulation defined as this, as Dan talked about already. And when people do question formulation, we have observed that there are consistent phenomena across grades from K to higher education and universally from United States and beyond. And so in sum, like we heard and observed that question formulation deepen, accelerate, and enhance learning. A theory of question formulation is about what happens when people formulate their own question, and then also what changes consistently occur as a result of formulating one's own question. So I'm gonna show our theory of question formulation for learning on one slide. So first, when people do question formulation, when people formulate one's own question, people become more focused, interested, curious, have fun, and also people go through a lot of cognitive process, as you stated in the reflection. So we think that question formulation facilitate engagement, comprehension, and discovery. Here, discovery can be discovery for themselves all the way to discovery for an entire field. And then, as a result of learning to formulate one's own question, people become more purposeful, committed, persistent, and self-directed. Also, their thinking become more flexible, analytic, agile, and independent. So we name them as like people become motivated learners and nimble thinkers. It means that they have more capability, they know how to learn better, feel self-efficacy and determination, and are able to learn on their own. It means that learners gain greater agency for learning. This is our question formulation theory. This is our theory of question formulation for learning. And I've seen that today's really quick experience of the QFT reflects this theory. So we are running out of time. So now let's have Dan have some comments. Yeah. Dan, you are muted.
Thank you, Tomoko. I just want to conclude with thinking about the significance of questions in learning for millennia. So this is a recent book that just came out about life lessons from the early Greeks, the pre-Socratic philosophers. And in a review in the New Yorker, it was stated, if we could see that the author traces the emergence of several key philosophical concepts, showing that the early Greeks developed intellectual habits, chief among them the use of questioning as the basis of knowing, which laid the groundwork for Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and for how we reason today. So it's just very interesting in talking about how the pre-Socratic philosophers established the use of questioning as the basis of knowing. So this recognition of the importance of questioning from very early on. And this is a scientist who does computer scientist does very interesting work, Stephen Wolfram, and he talked about, so what should people actually learn? Learn how to use tools to do things, but also learn what things are out there to do, and learn facts to anchor how you think about those things. A lot of education today is about answering questions, but for the future, with AI in the picture, what's likely to be more important is to learn how to ask questions and how to figure out what questions are worth asking, or in effect, how to lay out an intellectual strategy for what to do. So there you have a very strong statement about the power of that. And what I have talked about, particularly when talking with an audience like yours, of people who are thinking about technology, is that the skill of formulating questions is actually a technology. It's a technology that will never become obsolete because you can use it consistently in situation after situation. It's universally relevant and universally applicable. So we just want to let you know that we have resources that are available to you online at the Right Question Institute's website, rightquestion.org, and we encourage you to use them, and we allow people to use them through a Creative Commons license in which you are free to use them with identifying this for non-commercial purposes, with identifying the source, the reference as it is here. It's really been tremendous working with you, and we're eager to talk with you about what you're thinking now.
Yes,
So
please.
you're welcome to unmute yourself, and you're welcome to add to the chat. You're welcome to share your questions, your thoughts.
So Dan, that was a wonderful, concise presentation of the QFT. I've been using it for some years now, and really been inspired originally. Beneficial, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are now that we're in this moment, this disruptive moment that's happening across education as a consequence of generative AI. We've moved out of this fast food paradigm of Google solving all our quick questions for information gathering, but all of a sudden we have this whole new platform, a whole set of new tools and agents and what have you. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about all that ubiquitous technology, the capability of it, and how we can make good use of technologies such as the QFT. Do you have some thoughts about that?
Great. Well, thank you, John. So it's so. Think back to the quote that we used earlier this presentation from the college presidents who were asked, "What should a student learn in 4 years of college?" And they said, "There's so much knowledge, so much information, they can't learn everything. What they really need to know is how to frame an inquiry." Did we lose John?
Yeah, please continue.
So should I wait for John?
Yeah, I think some issue with this network, so we can continue.
So should we move on to somebody else's comment and then get back to John?
Yes, that would be a better idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, please feel free to ask question. Funyun asked one question. What is your take on the place use of closed-ended questions the students formulated?
Right. So we consistently find that it is a major discovery for very often for educators, but also for students, that they can find the value in not only in both kinds of questions, closed and open-ended questions, but they find new power in actually being able to change their questions from one kind to the other. Because what the very sophisticated leap in understanding that students experience with the QFT is a discovery that how you frame a question can affect the information you get. So that directly connects to AI, and we can talk more about that when John resumes. But it's so fundamental, so fundamental, and yet it is not necessarily a skill that is developed, and that's why that step is in the QFT. Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you to Doria.
Yeah, please.
And it's interesting. Be interesting what you feel that you would amend, on how you would amend your lessons.
Can you share a quick example of action plan? Fengru asked.
Of an action plan. So if you have developed your priority questions, very often we have people work on, okay, so this is my priority question, or these are my priority questions. What information do I need in order to answer these questions? And what do I need to do in order to get that information? So it's a really interesting next step in which people then move from analyzing the question to say, oh, this is the kind of information I'm now going to need. And so I actually need to design a way to do that. So people might say, I might need to create a survey. I might need to do additional research. I might need to test some hypotheses. So it's a very, very concrete next step. So I hope that's helpful. And how would one evaluate the quality of self-generated questions? Well, Tomoko, do you want to talk about a rubric that people are working on?
And maybe one related question to that that I have is, when you say right question, what is right? How do you know if it is right or not?
Yeah.
So in the process of QFT, we ask people to select questions that today's QFT, especially today, the prioritization instruction was selecting questions that you consider most important. So it's your choice, but like it depends on the purpose of learning and which question becomes important. So for example, if the next step of using the question would be like research, you might wanna select the questions that help advance your research. Right? So like it depends on the purpose of using the question. And as Dan mentioned, also we are actually developing a rubric for societally impactful research question as a part of National Science Foundation project with Northeastern University. So it's really interesting, even like there are no definition of societally impactful research questions so far. So we are trying to not really define like how to select better research question using our rubric. So we are in the process of doing it. But like as for the QFT, in the prioritizing step, like we ask people to select based on their own learning purposes and the next step. Do you want to add anything, Dan?
Well, thank you, Tomoko, and to Shichan Su's question about what is right. Yeah, right is a very loaded term. And so part of what we believe is that people have to figure out for themselves what is the right question. And so basically the process is designed in a way so that they can narrow it down and assess and evaluate their own questions. And what you're actually doing is you're developing people's ability to do that kind of self-assessment. And usually in most settings, people are waiting for somebody else to tell them, did they ask the right question? Did they give the right answer? And so this is about, and connects to agency. This talks about how people can develop their own agency in determining whether this is the right question. Now, even the most sophisticated scientists will share how they took a question and spent 2 years doing lab work on it, and then discovered that that wasn't the right question. So what it means is that the right question has to be the next question that I need to work on. And through that, I might discover that it was the wrong question or that I could create a better question. So it's really a process on getting to better questions.
Yeah, so okay. I have one more question, maybe couple of out of the couple of last questions that we'll have in this session. So we see that purpose play a very important role, the purpose and the context. So for a scientist, good questions or better questions are different. For a learner, it's different. For a website, content creators who are creating list of FAQs about a product, and then good questions are different.
Right.
So context and purpose to purpose, the questions differ. So that's one dimension of purpose. Other dimension of questions is, who is the audience?
Mm-hmm.
Whether your audience is your teacher, I mean, audience of the question, or the audience is one machine which is out there. I mean, for example, ChatGPT, who is going to receive your question and give some answers to you. Or the audience is your students. You are a teacher and you are asking questions, maybe Socratic questioning type questions, to elicit more thinking thought processes. So this is another dimension, the audience. First dimension was the purpose. Now purpose, audience, do these dimensions, does QFT act differently by changing these dimensions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Hitansu, for that. You're absolutely right. The questions that you need to develop, you need to address the right questions, very much depend upon the purpose of what you're doing and what you need to be doing. So you'll find on our website planning tools for where people actually have to determine, what are they teaching or what are they learning, what are they researching, and then identify that. And then you have to look at how you design your question focus so that it connects to what those purposes are. So the question focus for somebody, designing a website will be just will be a different question focus than somebody trying to develop a research project. So what you are pointing out is that the question formulation technique is a process that depends on how you use it. So that the structure is there, but you have to provide the content of what is the question focus. And that will then determine, how it will be used. And that's what's been so remarkable to see, is to see, I remember early on, we had, working with high school teachers, we had high school teachers say, well, I could see how you could use this in science for, science classes, but I don't think you could use this for history. And we work with history teachers that say, well, I could see how you could use this for history classes, but I don't see how you could use this for science classes. So what they were missing is that they found it so relevant to the work that they were doing, but they couldn't imagine that it could be used for something else. And what it actually is it's a structure, it's a protocol, but you have to design how you will use it.
Yes. So maybe John's network is not yet, he didn't yet get back. So we can continue to the John's question because John can anyways refer to the YouTube video afterwards.
Okay, so we could maybe wrap up with that. So John's question is a very important one about in this context of artificial intelligence, where there is so much discussion about how you prompt, how you write the prompt, how you ask the question, can determine the quality of the information that you get. And I was relating that back to what the college president said in terms of acknowledging that you can't possibly know everything, learn everything. So what you need to do is you need to figure out how to frame your inquiry. So that was long before artificial intelligence. Those quotes were from, 20 years ago. And Feynman's quote about all learning begins with the posing of a question is from 50 years ago. But it shows you, it connects back to the final quote about the pre-Socratic philosophers, which is questioning as the basis for new knowledge. And so it's very interesting that artificial intelligence gives you new tools, but what technology do you still need to use? You still need to use the technology of question formulation. No matter what the technology is on the answering side. And there's one book that I want to mention by a technology journalist named Clive Thompson, in which the book is called "You're Smarter Than You Think," how your technology is shaping your brain for the better. I forget the exact title, but it's You're Smarter Than You Think by Clive Thompson. And he basically concludes this whole book with, well, if you wind up having in your hand, something that can give you more information than you've ever been able to access before, and you're able to get access to information, what do you need to do? He said you need to think of harder questions. So again, this is the fundamental argument that no matter how advanced the knowledge acquisition technology will be, you still need to know how to formulate your own questions, how to formulate better questions, how to get to the right questions, how to assess your own questions, and how to realize that the question that was the right question previously is no longer the right question.
All right, so it's already 7 minutes past our timeline. So,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I would request the audience to feel free to go to the YouTube channel and post their questions, and we can we will try to answer the questions over the YouTube discussion threads. And I would like to, thank the two speakers. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tomoko, for such an engaging session. Question posing is like, question posing is very engaging tool. I mean, we all witnessed today, and hoping that more and more educators and the researchers and the learners are going to read more about it and start practicing these techniques in their classrooms, in their workplaces. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tomoko, once again for accepting the invite and then preparing for such a engaging session. Hoping to listen more from you in future. So thanks very much for attending.
Very good. And we just want to reiterate that people can go to our website and access free resources to support what they were introduced to tonight. And you can also contact us through our website. We look forward to hearing from you.
Yes. And also, I would like to announce that Asia Pacific Society for Computers in Education, APSCE, its flagship conference is in November last week, and it's known as ICCE, so International Computers in Education Conference. And within that conference, there is we are organizing one workshop on educational use of question posing. So feel free to explore the workshop and also contribute to the workshop by submitting your part of your research work around question posing and problem posing and use of questions and problem in teaching and learning. So with that, I would like to again thanks everyone who attended the session and everyone who is going to watch the session in future over YouTube. Thank you very much.
Thank you.